Hi, welcome to this week's episode of In the Hoods. This week we're going to be talking about Kips Bay, which is a neighborhood I nearly forgot about, except I now have a listing in Kips Bay and so decided it needed a little attention. Kips Bay runs from 34th Street to the north, 23rd Street to the south, for our purposes, Lexington Avenue to the west, and the East River to the east. Now, Kips Bay, as its name implies, refers to a bay on the East River that was between about 32nd Street and 37th Street, that was called Kips Bay after the early Dutch settler whose surname was Kip. Now, this family owned all the land along the East River up past the bay, which they farmed. And hence, it's amazing to me that these names stick, but they do. The Kips owned this land through the 1700s when it was sold, and it was sold to a British owner who also used it as a farm. And it's about at this point that it starts to be developed. And initially the development were wood frame structures, and many of them with shared walls and townhouses along the streets. And one of them actually survives to this day. It's at 203 East 29th Street. And it is the only, I believe, one of the only wood frame houses in New York City. It does have a brick carriage house right next door to it. And this house is privately owned and is historically protected. But I think it's the only one of its kind still in existence. Kips Bay today is known as an area that's very attractive to young people coming to New York. There are a number of both rental apartment buildings in Kips Bay and the area all along 3rd Avenue is full of bars and restaurants, which are full. They're packed. The area began to be developed for residential use probably in the 1960s. There were 2 big towers that were built called Kips Bay Towers, 2 big buildings on 33rd Street and also on 30th Street, and in between them is this huge garden. And these buildings were designed by I.M. Pei. They exist to this day. They have been converted to condominiums and are considered a truly lovely place to live. Across the street, there's been new condominium development across 33rd Street where there used to be little townhomes. And as you move west, you get to only vertical housing. There are still some brownstones on 30th Street between 1st Avenue and Lexington, but most of the structures in Kips Bay are high-rises. Another what was considered a new development at the time was Waterside Terrace, which are actually buildings that are built on a pier over the river from 25th Street to 27th Street. And these are high-rise luxury apartment buildings. And the area, there's stores downstairs, and there is also the United Nations International School in these buildings. The area has evolved over the years. Along 1st Avenue, you have what we call Medical Mile, which includes NYU Medical Center. Then you go down to Bellevue Hospital, which is famous for its psychiatric unit, but is also considered one of the #1 trauma units in New York City. It is a city hospital. And then as you go down to 23rd Street, you have the Veterans Hospital. And all of these hospitals share staff. They kind of work together, as I understand it, if there's a need. Bellevue Hospital was going to be the primary staging area for survivors of 9/11. And at that time, I lived close to the area, and of course, there were no survivors, and the whole neighborhood was plastered with posters of people missing. And after about a week, we knew that these people weren't missing, they were deceased. And those posters stayed up for at least a month because no one had the heart to take them down. But Kips Bay is a very lively neighborhood, and it's also close to the river. There's a promenade along the river now, which makes it a very, very pleasant place to live.